Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And this is the fifth episode of my series on listening to younger generations. And today I want to talk about the role of media in, in the lives of younger generations and in our lives as older generations, and how significant media plays in how we perceive one another and how we should be talking to one another. It was the great Canadian academic Marshall McLuhan back in the 50s and 60s produced an idea that has become almost the default way of understanding the way media is used today, which was the medium is the message. And so whatever you're looking at, if you're looking at this on a phone or you're looking at it on a computer or maybe even on a television set, which you can, and today, it's not what I'm saying that matters, it's what you're seeing as this medium that matters. So if I take my phone here, and my phone here and, look at it and constantly scroll through it, my focus is here, my attention is here, and I may not be able to recognize that there are other people in the room. But I'm recognizing that there's something here for me to pay attention to. This medium captures our attention, and it does so regardless of what age you are. And you find yourself scrolling through, looking for something. And the design of this is for the purpose of capturing our attention, holding our attention, and suspending our judgment about what is true or not. Because if you look at things that last for 5 seconds or 15 seconds, and then you're on to the next thing, then you're not having time to ponder, to reflect, to consider, to process what you're seeing. You're simply being affected by the experience of seeing something. And it may be on TikTok and you're watching a dancer, or it may be on YouTube and you're watching a 20-second clip from a 2 hour or 3 hour long podcast. What we're seeing is intended to delay our sense of what is true, of making that decision, so that we might continue to give ourselves to this. What we do not, I think, truly understand very well is that this is a form of capture, a form of seduction. And this experience of being captured by the phone or captured by a video or a series of videos or a series of video clips is a way of seducing us into believing certain things as true when they might not be at all. In fact, it's a way of arguing, so to speak, and a case for something to be true that has no resemblance to reality at all. I call this the culture of simulation, and I see that as a form of seduction. Seduction, like pornography, is seduction. It seduces us to believe something. Sexual pornography seduces us to believe that we are essentially, and by essential I mean almost singularly, we are nothing more than sexual beings, and so our whole life should be oriented around sexuality. Or it could be that there are other types of pornography, such as political pornography, which also uses images, projecting images to affect our own judgment about what is true in very complex situations like we've been watching over the last few weeks of demonstrations in Minneapolis. We don't really know what's going on there because we're giving small doses that are designed to send a particular message. Whether that message is true or not is secondary. What is important is to capture our attention and to hold our attention and suspend our judgment. And once we have our judgment suspended, we are captured by the seduction, and we now are living in some kind of what I'm calling a false consciousness. This false consciousness says, I know what is true because I've seen it on the screen. That's how the medium affects our judgment. But we don't know anything about whether it's true or not because there's no way for us to have been directly involved or directly engaged with what we're seeing on the screen. As a result, we are captured, we're controlled. And so the whole purpose, the way these devices have become a part of our lives, is to create a social control so that we will purchase whatever the purpose of the social control has determined for us. Now, the purchase may be of some product. It may be of some political ideology, or it may be some opinion about some figure. I mean, I think one of the things that was really clear back during the first election, the election in 2016, was that the medium of the internet had a tremendous effect upon how people viewed Donald Trump. Whether it was true or not was not the point. What was going on there was a way of separating or segmenting the population into smaller groups that could be manipulated to cast votes or to not vote or to communicate perspectives to people in ways that would constantly create a kind of divisive environment. This is true for not only older people, but especially for the younger generation. They have grown up with these phones. And so how we who are older talk with them about what they see on the phone, I think determines whether we can have an entree into being influential in their lives. I use that word intentionally, the word influential, because influence has become kind of the term to determine whether the social media creators, and in this sense, I'm a social media creator, but I have a different approach to this than the vast majority of them. But for them, social media influence has to do with how many eyes are watching the screen when you are presenting your video or your message. The medium is the experience of watching, and the experience of watching is not an experience of cognitive, rational thought, but rather of feelings and of association with feelings that have already been predetermined as probably ones that are for you in particular. That's why there are these things that we call algorithms. So your algorithm, which has been determined to a certain extent by what you have watched, what you're scrolling and what you're seeing, is in this sense a perfect understanding of who you are, apart from something deeper and more realistic about who you are. So if you were to have a conversation with me, would be sitting in a coffee shop and we would have a conversation. I would ask you questions that are not about what you have seen on your phone or watched or scrolled through on your phone. I wouldn't be asking those questions because I'm not really interested in how you align with the larger issues of the day. I don't really care whether you say you are supportive of Donald Trump or you don't like Donald Trump. That has no bearing on how I view you. I'm more interested so what do you think our government should do in taking care of, uh, immigrants, aliens, or education, or things of this. I'm looking for a more thoughtful understanding of what you think. And if you're not very well versed, then we're going to have a conversation where you have a chance to talk about what you think, actually think. I'm not going to try to determine what you should think. I'm just going to ask, what is it that you think? And how does this factor into how you view your life and how you want to live your life? This is the power of media that is difficult to counter because media, if we're unconscious about it, will have a way of forming our own emotions and our own mindset so that we're captive of of the culture of simulation. So what I'm suggesting in our interactions together between the generations is that we talk less about how I identify myself and more about what is it that I want for my life? What is it that I want to do? Where would I like to go? What is it that I'm interested? What do I read? Have you read a book recently? What is that you read? Tell me about what you found there. Things that have required you to do something, like picking up a book and actually reading it, or having gone someplace to discover something. Oh, I went to the Grand Canyon and I saw something that I've never seen before. Where you have been physically and mentally engaged in something that is directly um, a part of your life experience in that moment that is separate from the screen. You have the media that has a conditioning effect, a programming effect upon us. But when we go and we experience things directly, like if we were to have a conversation at a coffee shop, then that direct experience is much different. And what happens there is that the the greater dimensions that you have as a human being are allowed to come out. And we could talk about many, many different things instead of one thing and focused on only that one thing. I've watched over the years how people can be manipulated. I understand that well, and I think it doesn't serve them well because what they end up finding is that they don't reach a point of feeling very confident about themselves, and they feel very much dependent on other people to make them feel a certain way. I remember back in the 70s when I was in college that one of the this is before we had portable phones, but what we had was a lot of religious cults. And you could go places and they would be standing on a street corner handing out pamphlets. And if you went and talked to them, I remember I was I was in the I think I was in the airport in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I was waiting to get on a plane. And a member of one of these cults came over and began to talk to me. And I just began to ask her questions. And I could tell that she had never thought about the things that I was asking her. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of her handlers come over and interrupt us and take her away. I see the same things happening today as people are manipulated into having a certain sense of understanding of the world that is very narrow and very prejudicial and very much oriented around creating a divisive perspective where there is good and evil in very simple and um, very contentious ways. And what I know is that within the heart of all of us, there's good and evil, and it's what we feed that is really what matters in our daily lives. And the question is, how do I talk to people, particularly people who are younger, about the things that they want? And and what you find out if you have these kinds of direct conversations, you'll find that you can have a conversation where they are recognizing that there's more to their lives than what they see on their phones. And they know this, but they don't know what to do with that because they do not have the sufficient direct engagement with people where they're not talking about what they're seeing on the phone for them to have a sense of gaining a sense of presence or a sense of personhood or a sense of agency that I can do things that I didn't realize I could do. This is the idea that I have when I talk about the culture of reality. The culture of reality is not what I choose mentally to believe. The culture of reality is what I do to determine what I can do. What can I do? Well, can I cook a meal? Can I plant a garden? Can I do things that are tangible and require my hands to be a part of it or my body to be a part of it, where I'm engaged physically in doing something which tests my knowledge and my emotions and my capacity to marshal all these together to accomplish something. I mean, if you've learned how to ride a bike, for example, if you learned how to ride a bike, then you've done all of these things because riding a bike is a very complex thing that once you know it, you will never forget how to do it because it becomes this tacit knowledge that is embedded in who you are that you can draw upon every time you do it. But if you've never actually tried to ride a bike and you've only read about it, or if you've only watched people on a phone ride bikes, then you'll never actually know whether you can ride a bike. This is why I think the culture of reality is what we need to focus on, where we learn how to do things, we learn how to accomplish things, and we try things. I call this a way of testing our identity. We're testing who we are. It's a test to determine, do I have the gifts and the talent to go do this? I think about when I first learned how to snow ski, and then I was not very good at it at first, but then after a couple of days of going to a ski school in the morning and skiing through the afternoon, I became very comfortable on my skis. But if I had never tried and only thought about, oh, I'd love to be a skier, but had never tried, then I would never know whether I could do it or not. I think this is why we engage with reality, because it is consequential. And by consequential, it means it is giving us direct signals to us about what works and what doesn't work. And therefore, when we discover what works, then we want to keep doing those things. And what doesn't work, we discard. So when we have a sense of or testing ourselves, and we're beginning to learn, we become self-aware, and that self-awareness is a type of separating our sense of who we are from those who would program us or say that you must be a part of this, that if you're not aligned with this group or not aligned with that group, then you are not a person. When you're able to walk into a situation, let's say you walk into um, a Republican or a Democratic political meeting, and you walk in and you're able to walk into both of those without losing your sense of who you are, and you can listen, you can reflect, you can say, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense, and you are able to make a decision on your own about which party you would want to join or not join at all. Then what you have gained is a sense of self-awareness that allows you to see the world in a much broader and clearer way. From that, you would gain freedom to act on the things that matter to you. In a previous video, I talked about being able to say no because we have a yes. So when you gain a sense of freedom, what you have also learned is that these are the values that matter to me. These are not the values of someone else that I'm taking on because I need to feel attachment to that group. No, I'm taking on these values because I feel like this is representative of me as a person. And when I feel like I can do that, then I can say, well, I want to go do these things. I want to try and learn a new language. I think I want to see after I finish college if I can go live overseas. Maybe I can go to France and I can study French literature, or I can go to to South America and learn how to speak Spanish. Or I know people who have done these sorts of things. What I'm saying is that when you are free of the simulation and you're free to be self-critical about the effect of the phone on you, then what you gain is a sense of freedom and a sense of self-awareness and self-respect. And no one can then tell you you are not worthy. You find yourself that I am enough for who I am, and I can do things because I've decided I want to do that. I think this is one of the challenges that we have all faced in the modern world, because what the modern world would like us to think is that we make our own choices, but those choices really are not our choices. They are choices that are presented to us, and they're the only ones we really are allowed to consider. This is why I talk about being hostages in a luxury hotel. We're provided all the luxuries of life. I mean, the modern world has been a wonderful boon for all kinds of consumer products, beautiful cars, clothes, luxury vacations, all of these sort of things. But at another level, we're still kind of hostages to the social and political ideologies that exist in the world today. And if you want to stand apart from that, then you have to become to grips with who am I, not because I'm a part of some group, but who am I as a person? And what is it that I want for my life? I think that this is certainly an aspect of what the young generations must face. They have to address this issue of how they are spoken to through the medium of digital communication. Uh, and those of us who grew up not as digital natives, but in a much more analog world, we see it, but we don't understand what they face very well. And so I think for us, it is important for us to build relationships with people in the younger generation so that we can share each other's experience and learn how to understand the challenges that we each face in this world that is presented to us every day in such a fast and disruptive form. I remember, beginning to talk about this with people and realize that I was I was constantly being asked to take a stand, and I had when Donald Trump became a candidate, I didn't have an opinion one way or the other. I didn't have an opinion about Joe Biden. I didn't have an opinion about um, Barack Obama or George Bush. I didn't have an opinion because a decade previous to all that, I had come to realize that the institutions, the political institutions in the world, were no longer representing the the whole country, but they were representing their own interest. And so I just was not interested in what they had to say. I was watching what they had to say. I knew what they were saying, but I wasn't interested in for my own self awareness and my own self uh, sense of security. I did not believe that they provided me any resource of security for my life. And so I had this sense about Donald Trump that he was a a product of the system as it had unfolded, and that it had if it had not gone in the direction where it had become so corrupt and so um, oriented around the key people in the parties being the ones who were the beneficiaries, he would never have stepped forward to run for president. So he was the product of their corruption, and he was the antidote to their corruption. But that still didn't mean that I was a fan of his or a promoter of his. I just saw him for what he was. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and this was a month before the 2020 election. And we had spent a day together, and at the end of that day, we were in his workshop, and he began to talk about Donald Trump, and he had this dialogue that it was obviously a rehearsed dialogue, and it was rehearsed because he had heard it um, told to him time and time again through the media that he was consuming. So the medium of the phone and the medium of social media had programmed him to say a specific set of characteristics or qualifications or disqualifications of Donald Trump, why he shouldn't be elected president. And they were not new to me. I'd heard them many, many times before. And I just realized that, this is political rhetoric. And, and I, t- and I told my friend, well, yeah, okay. So what? I said, I'm not a fan. I'm not an enemy. I just think of him as this person who is disrupting the political system as as it had developed. And he turned to me and he verbally attacked me, saying that I was crazy, that I was insane, and that I was a danger to the country and a danger to democracy. And I knew then that he had been captured and was socially controlled by a culture of simulation where he had been seduced to believe in what he had been told and that he was living with a false consciousness. And it wasn't whether what he said to me, it wasn't whether what he said to me was true or false. That was not the point. The point was that he believed that what he said was the absolute truth and that anyone who did not believe it was a danger to the world and was insane. And if we had continued that, the question for me was, well, what sort of violence would he bring to me if I challenged him on this? And so I chose not to. I said, I just don't believe what you're saying is correct. And from that moment on, our relationship was over. And I still see him on social media, and he's still saying the same things he was, almost 5.5 years ago. So people can be captured by the social programming that happens through the medium of the internet and of phones. But that doesn't mean that their lives are better. And particularly if you have a relationship with people who are younger, whether high school or in their 20s or 30s, it is important that you're careful in how you approach them on talking about these issues of politics and of other types of social issues, because this is their world and we're living in it. And the question is it a healthy world for them? And what I find is when you start coming back to ask them questions, not about what their opinion is about a particular person or a situation, but rather what is it that they want and what is it that they find as difficult to understand as to what's going on in the world. When you begin to have that kind of honest, direct conversation, then you begin to see where the possibilities of having a longer term relationship of respect and trust and openness can happen. And that's what I would suggest that you, who are whatever you are, whatever age you are, that you seek to do that with all the people that you meet, whether older or younger, that you seek to have an open and honest conversation or relationship where you're not attacking one another, but you're simply able to listen and to learn and to answer the questions that seem to be shared by both of you, but have not been maybe made evident or made clear in the way life has presented itself to you. I started this whole series with the idea that there are answers to questions that have never been asked. And I think a lot of how we deal with the media, is an answer, but we've never asked the question, why does it exist in the way it does? And how does it function for the benefit of people and the benefit of communities and families and of the world? How does it function so that it is beneficial? And I'm convinced that it has a beneficial role to play. I would say that the greatest thing that has come from the use of our phones is that we are able to have relationships with people around the world that are as essentially like local neighbors. I know people around the world, and I'm concerned for them in their world, in their neighborhood, in their business, in their families, just like I am for the people that live around on my block here. That's the beauty of what we have here. But if we allow for the medium to control us and to create a sense of this simulation of reality that we are told is being hidden from us, I think it will make it more difficult for us to have those relationships. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I commend you to my Substack, where there are a number of posts that I've written over the last couple of months since the beginning of the year that delve into this, and I'm talking about this idea of us being hostages living in a luxury hotel. I've talked about the culture of simulation, the culture of reality. I talk about center and periphery. I talk about the two global forces, which pits the globalization of the world against the localization of the world. All these are different concepts and ways of talking, and they can be pulled into a conversation with people where we can have a honest and clarifying conversation with one another when we talk about, well, how do I see this happening in my life? How do you see this happening in your life? And when we are able to express that sort of thing, then what we have is communication. And we may have the opportunity to do something collaboratively, and where we can move forward and maybe join across the boundaries of the generations to say, we have something together that we share that we can bring to the world, which will be beneficial to many people. And that is my hope in what I'm seeking to do by trying to help our generational differences become less and less important. I'm sure that This is not the last time you will hear from me on this, but this is the end of the series for now. And I commend you to think about this and share these five short videos with people so that you can begin to have conversations with people that really matter and are not simply based on your own bias or your own need for confirmation bias or your own kind of ignorance about what's going on, but you're actually seeking to understand and to know something in a way that you've never known before. And I commend you to do that. And if you need help, then all you have to do is ask. And I'll have a conversation with you, and we can learn how to talk with one another, regardless of who you are and regardless of who I am. If you watch the Eddie Network podcast, that's what you see twice a week. I'm having conversations with people who I've never known, never met, don't know who they are, except for a little fragment of understanding. And yet we are able to have a deep and meaningful conversation every time. And it's because there is a pattern. There's a way of having conversations which allow both people to be able to express themselves openly and honestly and in a respectful, appreciative way. And I wish that for you, because if you're able to create that kind of interaction with people on a daily basis, you will find that your life is far more fulfilling, and you'll find that many of the questions that you have will have answers that were already there, evident to you. And so I really would like to be able to say that, in another 10 years, we're talking about answers to questions that we have been asking. That would be a good thing.